Hello, and welcome to Messy Conversations with Watch Hollie. I'm your host, Hollie.
And I'm Alyssa.
We are starting this podcast to get into the nitty gritty and discuss everything from friendships to relationships to acquaintances and social situations. Everything in between. Today, we're going to talk about compatibility. Let's first start with what does it mean to be compatible with someone?
I think that's a really good question. I think there are so many different types of compatibility within itself, right? Like there's compatibility within romances or compatibility within friendships, even on a work-based level, compatibility with your job and your coworkers,
I think something that's super important is that when people think of the word like relationships, they usually think romantic, but it's like not it doesn't have to be romantic at all. So when you're thinking of compatibility, is it like, oh, is it in relationship? It's literally in all relationships, whatever relationship that is, if it's platonic or romantic.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think at the base level, compatibility at its base definition still means the same across the board, but within each different social situation, it can very much differ from one to another.
Yeah. So what is your definition specifically to compatibility?
For me, I very much think of compatibility as like very much as cliche as it is. It just feels like when you know, you know.
I think something that's super important though is that actually my therapist talked about this the other day, where sometimes you think like you feel that feeling of like, oh, I don't know why I love them, or I don't know why we're so good together, but I just kind of feel it. But I feel like if you're actually like really compatible with someone, you can list specific reasons. Like
Yes.
Not just like, oh, well, we're just so good together. It's they're open, they're honest, the communication is there. Like there's this specific reasons of why you're compatible. But I agree. I also think it's like, well, that's what it starts out with. It's like, oh gosh, you just know.
Absolutely. And it's also interesting because as you go through life, you kind of create this own identity and definition of what compatibility means to you. So for example, when you're in middle school and your body is raging with hormones, you don't know what compatibility means. And you're like, compatibility just means any cute person in the class, right? But then
true.
as you travel through your life and go into college, post-college, whatever careers, compatibility starts to be fine-tuned and really get more defined. And so that you are like, this is exactly what it means to me. Like, this is exactly like what I'm looking for in friendships. This is what I'm looking for in career and that vibe with my coworkers. And I think that that's just a really, really cool fact of life that like, as we grow older, we're learning not just more about ourselves, but our own definitions of things like compatibility.
I think you're so right in the concept that things change and you're allowed to have different opinions as your like quote unquote compatibility changes. It's like, oh, well, this is what I thought compatibility was. And you actually then learned more about yourself. And then later you are allowed to change your mind and switch up, even if it's with the same person, even if it's with the same friendship or whatever. Like as you're growing, your compatibility can slightly change and it's okay to change along with it.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's super, super important. I think it's really important to also change as you get older. Like even just within understanding of things that are not compatible, because I feel like that is such a common experience within relationships is like after you get out of this really bad breakup or bad relationship, you now learn what it is that you're not compatible with. You learn what you're not looking for in relationships. And that's so true with like friends and everything. And so it can be very much the same thing with like, oh, well, opposites attract, we've all heard that before. So maybe I'm compatible with someone who is the exact opposite of me. And then you try to explore that avenue as well.
Yeah, it's kind of also goes hand in hands with like setting your own boundaries. And I know that's like a whole conversation, like a different conversation, but you have to like set your own boundaries to see like who you are compatible with. And if you are not, you have to say, okay, cool, thank you, goodbye, and then learn.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's also hard because you are trying to teach yourself of like, how do you identify what is compatible and how do you identify what not compatible feels like?
That's a really good segue to kind of what we feel is compatibility, of the sense of like if someone's listening and they're like, okay, great. Like now we're talking about kind of that feeling and stuff. Like, what do you think, I guess? Like, what is compatible?
So for me, compatibility is very much smooth conversations, smooth vibes. It's very much when you can sit in a car with each other just in silence and not feel awkward. And it's where like you fully understand the other person on such another level that it just doesn't feel like you need words to communicate. You can just look at each other and give each other the look, and then they'll give you the look and be like, uh-huh. And they'll be like, mm-hmm. And then you just had an entire conversation. It feels, for me, compatibility feels a lot like love. And I don't mean love necessarily in terms of like the romantic sense, but in other senses of love as well. Like your love for friendship, your love for people and human engagement, whatever. And so compatibility very, very much feels like it ties in very similarly with that aspect of love.
Yeah. And you don't have to be compatible with everyone. I think that's something that we all, maybe growing up, we were trying to achieve, whether we were in school or whatever we were doing in a workplace of, oh, I want everyone to like me. And so I'm going to try and be compatible with everyone. But that's just not how it works. And you don't have to be compatible with everyone. It's so valid to not like people. And if once you realize that, then hopefully your mindset will kind of change of, oh, I hope everyone likes me. And then you go and you'll do things for yourself versus trying to be a people pleaser.
Absolutely. And I think that we often grow up a lot trying to be that people pleaser, and we want to be compatible with absolutely everyone that we come in contact with. But it's actually a really, really, really good thing to find out that there are people that we are not compatible with, because much like everything else with the world, personalities aren't meant to be, this widespread thing that's just a total universal thing that everyone can latch onto. Like every individual person is so unique, but then also so unique in the sense of like they attract what they give out. They attract the energy that they give out. They have their little group that flocks with them. They have their people who are attracted to them and everything. And it's very much like that type of compatibility. And when you start realizing, oh, there are people who I'm just not compatible with, whether it's friends or relationships or whatever, then you really start to build this like self-identity to understand, who am I? Who do I want to be? What are the kinds of people that I want to be compatible to?
And the more that you get to know someone, the more compatible that you will be. So it starts off as acquaintance, and then it goes from there. The more you hang out with them, the more that you learn. And maybe you hang out with them for a few weeks and then you kind of realize, it still feels really awkward. Like I don't really like enjoy hanging out with them that much. And then that's when you kind of realize it's like, okay, it's okay to be acquaintances and you can bow out nicely. It's like you don't have to. So I want to go to maybe a question. So we had people submit questions for us to answer. But this question is, why do you think you, as in Alyssa and Hollie, work so well as friends? Same personalities, or is it versus opposite attract? I don't know who wants to start off with this question, you or me.
So we'll just giggle the whole time.
Okay, perfect.
That's why we work so well as friends, because we'll just giggle back and forth.
Forever. Okay, I'll kind of like start off a little bit and then you can like jump off me if you want. I think like at the beginning it was kind of opposites attract, in the sense that when I first met you, so me and Alyssa met when I was having this thing called HollieCon, where I invited my community to the beach, and just people in my community could just show up. And Alyssa saw that and just took it upon herself, and she's like, I'm gonna go, which is amazing. I'm so glad you did, obviously. And you showed up and you were like the life of the party when I was like this anxious ball mess, whatever. Oh, that's funny. That was a pun on accident. And I feel like we were kind of opposite in that manner of like, I don't know, like I wasn't much of a planner. I was definitely in my shell. And then you were like extrovert planner, like, oh, this is what we're doing, this is how we'll do it. And I don't know, I feel like you definitely were like, you're going to be my friend.
Yes.
And then we kind of just like went from there.
Yeah, that's actually very much kind of like what my experience was too. I think that it's really interesting because very similar to compatibility, I think that your friends and your definition of friends also grows over the course of your lifetime as well. So like when you're in elementary school, your friends are going to be, you know, the next door neighbors or the kids in your class. Like you don't really get too much of a choice. And then you get to, you know, high school where then you can start picking and choosing your classes. You're like, oh, you know, I'm really interested in this club or this activity. And then you have the opportunity to expand your friend group and make friends with those people with the same interests. And then you can go either to college or whatever after graduation. And then like as you enter into the real world, your standard and your criteria for friendships also grows and grows and grows. I had a very, very fortunate situation when I was in college to where I was surrounded by an absolutely incredible group of people. And they all really taught me what it's like to be like a true friend to someone and just have that really, really, really deep love for all of your closest friends. And so then I took that. And then when I discovered Twitch, I randomly found Hollie when she was playing Hollow Knight, and I will never forget this. The very first time that I went into her stream, I just had this gut feeling, and I was like, I need to be best friends with her. Like, I don't know anything about her, but I just have this feeling that she needs to be in my life and that she's going to be a big part of my life.
When you know, you know.
Exactly. When you know, you know. And that same gut feeling has happened to me over the course of my life, like just a handful of times. And every single time, it has never steered me wrong. And so I was like, I need to make this friendship happen. I'm going to force her to be friends with me. And so then that's why I was like, she's having this a big event. I absolutely need to go to it. Like, we are going to be best friends. I just know it.
I mean, yeah, I don't think it was a very forced situation, though. Like, I know you said, like, I'm going to force her to be my friend. I mean, maybe that's what you were thinking going into it, but then we just became friends.
It's like the extrovert who adopts the introvert.
Yeah. That's literally what this is. Yeah. Yeah. Do you have any other, like, opinions with that? Like, why do you think we work well as friends?
I think that we work very well as friends because our mentality and maturity and humor is all very much on the same page. So like our humor, our wittiness, we can really riff off each other like when we're just hanging out, and it works super, super well. Like, it's so smooth. Our emotional maturity is literally at the same place. So we can have these sorts of really, really deep discussions and have this open communication with each other. And just really like a whole bunch of similarities. Like, I very much feel like we're on the same page about so many things. I feel like we are very close to the same points in our life. And that just like really, really, really makes us connect and just like makes us become such a strong unit.
I think personally, we very much so have a lot of respect for each other in very specific ways. Well, obviously in like all ways, but like let's say like Alyssa knows marketing, business, like PR, like that's her thing. And so I will go to Alyssa for like, and I respect like everything she says in that arena. It's like, we're not fighting over, it's like, I'm not like, oh, well, I think because my business major, like I recognize like my, what's the word? Inability to do those things, and where I can't like compete, I take a step back and I recognize I don't know the information as well as Alyssa does. And I feel like it's kind of like vice versa as well too, where like she'll come to me with certain things and she'll respect my like opinion or my knowledge on certain situations. And I think we very much so like don't ever compete in that way.
Yeah, 100%. And like kind of going off of that, I feel like that's why we are so compatible, because like in places that one of us needs help in, the other one is able to come and like, you know, give that support. It's like a jigsaw puzzle, you know, where you're trying to fill in all the little tiny pieces. Like you'll have some pieces that look like they go together. You're like, is this quite right? I'm not entirely sure. And then you have those pieces that just fit together so perfectly. And you're like, okay, these pieces very obviously go next to each other. Like that is how I view compatibility. And so I very much think that that's like exactly what we do too. Like we're just two of those puzzle pieces that just are clearly so connected and intertwined.
I'm going to ask a question that's not necessarily on this question sheet that someone submitted. But I think it's a good thing to talk about, where we're talking about how we're compatible. Is there a person that you, and I can talk about this as well too, have been with platonically, romantically, whatever, that you found out that you weren't compatible with?
Yes. Oh my gosh. One of my old relationships, actually, going off of the whole opposites attract. I was very initially attracted to this guy because he was very shy, very introverted, very quiet to himself. And I'm very much the opposite of that. And so I was like, I have never experienced that before. And then this guy just has so much of that experience. Like, I think that'd be so cool, you know, very much opposites attract. Like this could be so great. And at the first part of our relationship, it very much was, you know, of course, the honeymoon stage, everything like that, everything was great. But then as the relationship went on, I very quickly realized like how incompatible we were, because even on something basic like going to a party, right? Like I would absolutely love to go to a party, but because he's very much an introvert, he doesn't want to go to a party. So the options are he comes to the party and just has a whole bunch of social anxiety the entire time.
Mopes in the corner.
And then doesn't have any fun. Or option two, he stays home. I go to the party myself. I have to awkwardly make him an excuse for why he's not at the party. And then the entire time that I'm at the party, I'm not having fun because I wish that he was there too. I wish that I was with him, you know? And so it very much felt like a lose-lose type of situation. But that's very much one of those situations where it's like, I then knew what I was not compatible with. Like I knew that at that level of opposites attract, that extremities did not apply to me.
That's very fair and very valid. Did you just ended up breaking it off?
Yeah, so we did end up breaking it off. It was just very much one of those things where it just really boiled down to compatibility. We thought that we were really compatible with each other, but it just did not end up being that way.
I had, I guess I could talk about all of the male relationships I had in the past, but obviously I'm lesbian, so not compatible whatsoever. I think that's like a whole other conversation in itself we don't have to get into. But for me, I think kind of like once I got out of like my longer relationship with a woman, I was like going on dates and trying to figure out exactly what I was looking for and stuff like that. And obviously I won't name anyone or anything, but I remember I went on a few dates with this one girl who I think like personally, like we were very compatible at first. That's what I thought. And I was like, oh, like she's super funny. We're laughing constantly. Like she's like a good looking woman. Like just like, you know, the initial thoughts of why you think that you're compatible, you know, a very surface level. And it ended up being when like our communication style did not mesh whatsoever. For me, I'm very open. I'm very honest, and I appreciate the same from the person that I'm going on dates with of, hey, like if you are going to disappear for 3 days, let me know. Just let me know and I'll be fine. It's like whatever you got to do. I am so understanding, but as long as you communicate. And for me, I communicate with upfront. If I have any questions, I'm going to go to them. If I'm going to whatever, like I will just always communicate. And so I communicate at the very beginning of like, hey, this is the level of communication and this is my expectations. And it, for someone, I don't talk about ages, but when we're getting a little bit older. And so when you're like established in how you communicate like later on in life, it's not much is going to change. Personally, I feel like you can make an effort and compromise and things like that, but not like straight out the bat. If you're noticing things when you're starting to talk to someone in a romantic sense, like, oh, their communication is not like mine, like I usually just am like, okay, well, we are not compatible in that way. And that is fine. Like we obviously had really good dates. Like we went on like 4 dates or something and we laughed the whole time and, you know, but it boiled down to compatibility. And I bowed out and I was like, you're a great person. Like, I wish you all the well, but like our communication styles is not compatible. And that's my highest priority in a relationship. So
Yeah, 100%. And it's and that's kind of what I was meaning earlier, where it's like, as you go through life, you kind of start to fine tune your definition of compatibility. So, like for you, you very much have to be compatible on the level of communication, you know? And so there's so many of these different facets that you don't really think of when you hear the word compatible or your compatibility with someone else. You just think, oh, yeah, you know, it's just this like great energy that you've got with each other. But in reality, it's so much deeper than that.
And it kind of actually goes into our next question that was submitted by someone, where it says, how do you know when it's lust versus compatibility?
For me, I know the difference for lust versus compatibility when the honeymoon phase is over. When you are going through that very first initial lust section, you always have on the rose-colored glasses. You see these red flags. You're like, no, that's not a red flag. That's like a little tiny baby pink flag. Like nothing's wrong with them. They're perfect. And you see them as absolute perfection. But then, because you see them as absolute perfection, you then think that, oh my gosh, they're perfect for me. We're so compatible. We are just on the same wavelength. Like everything is just going so great. So for me, I very much define it as after that like initial this person is the best person I've ever met phase has kind of like died down, then understanding, okay, then taking off the rose-colored glasses and be like, seeing this person for actually who they are, what their actual attributes are, characteristics are, communication style is, and then basing my compatibility off of those features.
I'm going to say that I read an article when in reality I watched a TikTok, but we're going to pretend that didn't. Okay. So I read this article and it said that sometimes the honeymoon stage could last up to 2 years. I don't know if that's true or not. Please do not quote me. Someone can Google that afterwards. But it was super interesting to me. Even if it's just in my mind, I'm like 3 to 6 months. Like that's what I normally think. Like honeymoon stage, but this person literally said 2 years. Alyssa, what do you think about that?
I mean, I can definitely understand where they're coming from in like the aspect of 2 years. But for me, I very much like feel like the end of the honeymoon stage is more so of like a gentle decline down rather than a harsh cliff. So for some people, they start to feel that gentle decline down at like, you know, like 2 months, but they don't realize that they're getting out of the honeymoon stage because today feels just like tomorrow and today feels like yesterday did. And so they slowly don't realize that they're coming down off of that honeymoon phase until they're further along in their relationship. So I can very, very much see where people say that their honeymoon phases last for 2 years. And I think that that's because they don't realize the rate at which the honeymoon phase is slowly ending. And so it just kind of keeps going longer and longer and longer, you know?
Yeah. Interesting. So with that being said, let's say the honeymoon stage lasts like for a while. It doesn't have to be 2 years. It could be 6 months or even a year. That's like a long time, obviously. Obviously,
Yes.
It's a whole year of your life for then you to realize that you're compatible or not compatible, like either or.
Yeah.
I think having like the wherewithal of what Alyssa said, learning what those traits are that you are looking for, now that you don't have the colored glasses, you can make those decisions. And even if it's a year down the road, you can learn that you're not compatible. And I think that's a lot of the times what kind of happens is that those glasses kind of come off and you're like, wow, actually, we're not that compatible. And you could be 2 years into the relationship.
I mean, that's exactly what happened with me. With the relationship that I was talking about previously, we dated for 2.5 years.
Oh my gosh, that's so long.
It was a long time, but after a while, I was like, okay, I guess we're not compatible, and it's 2 years later. But for me, I don't take that as oh my gosh, I just wasted all of my time. I very much take that as, okay, now I know exactly what I'm not compatible with.
Yes.
And that really, really helps me focus on finding my future whoever to be who I am compatible with.
Yeah, I think it's easy to hold on to relationships because you've been in it for so long. So the longer you're in it, the longer you want it to work out, or the more.
Oh, 100%.
everything that we said before can kind of be translated to platonic relationships and coworkers and things like that. I think the real question and discussion has to be about how to navigate it, because you are stuck with your coworker. You're not necessarily stuck with your friend. You can bow out of friendships, but you can't really bow out of bosses unless you quit, I guess. But usually we don't have the luxury to do that. We can talk about that in another podcast if we want to, of like how to navigate compatibility with coworkers and friendships and things like that. But I think we did a good job with, and you can translate it from romantic to platonic.
Yeah. And I think it's also really important to be able to notice the difference between, hey, I feel compatible with this person in a friendship sense, or I feel compatible with this person in like a romantic sense, you know?
Very
and it's
true.
really, really important to also note how you're compatible with those different types of people and being able to very expressively identify what the attributes are that you enjoy in that person and why you two are compatible.
That's so true. And I think something that I don't know, for me, I got caught up in this when I was younger and naive, and I don't know about you, but if anyone gives you attention, it doesn't mean that you're compatible. Just because they like you doesn't mean you have to like them back.
Yes. Yes, yes, yes.
All right. Well, that was pretty much it for me. Thank you so much for doing this with me.
Of course. Thanks for doing it with me.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I have no clue what we're necessarily going to talk about next time specifically, but next time it's going to be the same concept of talking about relationships, acquaintances, things like that. We have a Google form if you want to fill it out and ask us questions regarding friendships, acquaintances, or just like romantic relationships as well too, or any other thing that's kind of related to that topic.
If you guys want to check us out on social media, we are most active on Twitch. Go ahead and follow us at The Mess Express and at WATCHHOLLIE.
Perfect. Well, thank you. I love you dearly. I'll talk to you probably in like 5 minutes.
Perfect. I love you so much.
All right. I guess we'll just say bye, okay?
Okay.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.